Welcome everyone to the May 26th V3 implementation call. We appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to be with us today. Just as a reminder, these meetings are recorded and we offer them on our website and also on our YouTube channel for you to be able to review later or to share with somebody who wasn't able to make it to the meeting. We do consider these meetings conversational, so please be prepared to unmute or use the chat feature if you have questions or comments, input into the discussion items that we cover today. We're happy to have you contribute to those conversations. All right, first up in the agenda, we don't have a maintenance update because there's no maintenance this month. We got that notice from Laurel. So next we have ET3 update we appreciate Neil Milan and John Beckett being so good to keep us updated on the current happenings for ET3. That's been really beneficial in these meetings. So Neil or John, if either of you have something to share, we're happy to turn the time over to you.
Hey, Julianne.
John, if you are,
yeah,
please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm able to do that. If you don't mind, I'd like to just share my screen real quick, just so folks can see what I'm saying. Hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yep, looks great.
Okay. So just wanted to cover a few things in terms of submissions and just give people a little bit of idea of where we are. So yeah, we're seeing a very good flow of data coming in. Out of the 184 participants that's in the program, we only have 25 remaining to be onboarded. So, so this 25, we're really going to try and get them in by the 31st. This is that deadline that we've set. In terms of making sure that we've got everybody who is in the program at least onboarded. So there'll be some outreach that we will take and allow for folks to, you know, in terms of getting to the first step of onboarding, we want to give them as much assistance as possible. So so there'll be some focus on those 25 in the next coming days. In terms of submissions, we've got about 120 submitters that we have tracked that have come into using the API submitted data. We have about 165 security keys approved. So you can see that we do have a little bit of a gap, if you will, in terms of having the keys and using them to submit. So so that is something that we'll focus on as well. Post the 31st of May. In terms of tracking submissions, about 1.5 million of current year EPCRs that we've received. That's 1.5 from that 120 submitters. And then in terms of the historical data, it's about 3.1 million historical records that we've received. And we've been able to track that from about 100 submitters. So, you know, as you can see, the majority of the data we currently have is right around 5 million. And we are, you know, again, seeing much more historical records. That would be understandable. And as the year goes on, you know, that 1.5 is going to grow. So, so that's my update in terms of onboarding. I would like to say a couple things. We do have some folks that we're going to have to reach back out to that are still using de-agency state IDs that are incorrect in terms of what we have published as a part of our crosswalk. So we need to make sure that whatever you're sending in the payload of the EPCR records matches with that state ID. So there is, again, a correlation there. And if we don't have the value we're looking for, that record gets put to the side. And right now we've got a pretty good amount of those records that we're looking to resolve. So there'll be some activity and outreach there once we've determined who sent those records into us. So I just want to keep everybody up to date with that. We're doing great as far as the API goes. We're getting records coming in. All the organization IDs that we're expecting are there. So again, we just want to just give you an update in terms of the onboarding. So I'm going to pause there, and Neil, if you want to add anything.
There we go. Finally off mute. Sure. Thank you, John. All I'll add is that actually Memorial Day is our next submission deadline for ET3. And we're already working with those participants who already haven't, those EMS agencies who haven't set up their data submissions, which are just ongoing after we've set them up. But for those who haven't, we're working with those participants and reaching out to try to get them as quickly as possible to meet that deadline. And if for the vendors, since this is the primary audience in this call, if you're working with any participants who haven't completed onboarding and are submitting data, please, if possible, work with them to try to get at least an active API key ready to go by the May 31st deadline, Memorial Day. That's one of the things we're looking for. Again, ET3 is knowing full well that this is a big undertaking, and the agencies we support are all pulled everywhere for a lot of different missions. We're trying to be as flexible as possible. One of the things we're looking for is just some steady progress on onboarding. So from our perspective, and working with you on the vendor side, if there's anything we can do to assist to get them with fully functional API keys, those remaining participants, getting them fully functional API keys by Memorial Day, please do let us know. I'd also like to extend a big thank you for the coordination you've all done to make sure the data submissions are up and running. I know on our end, we've been a little slow with our ability to report counts to you. They have to kind of filter through a couple systems, but we appreciate all the emails and questions just to make sure everything is working well and we're receiving what you're sending. So please keep those questions coming. We don't mind them at all. And I think our reporting is a little more efficient now and a little faster, and we can give you more timely input as to what we've received. So please don't be shy about seeking out that information and confirmation from us. I think that's about all I've got from my end. So John, back over to you.
Okay. Yeah, that's all I have for updates, Julianne. So if you want, if there's any questions that the group has or any comments.
Yeah, John, this is Clay. I'll just mention real briefly, to the vendors and maybe to the state representative as well, the NEMSIS TAC is just going to be reaching out this week in regards to that 25, just making sure that there's awareness among the vendors and among the states and agencies that there are who is the 25 remaining, just so that there's no lack of understanding there. And then of course we'll rely on the vendors working with the ET3 group to make sure that onboarding is completed. But just a heads up, you may receive an email from the NEMSIS TAC, just making sure that folks realize who we're still kind of waiting on to get on board by Memorial Day. Thanks. John.
All right. Any other comments or questions? And just wanted to just say thanks to this group, as well as the technical advisory, the TAC folks, for their support. We couldn't have gotten here without them. And you guys have been great, particularly those that were engaged in the testing that we had late last year. I think that helped us to get to this point as well. So just want to thank everyone for their efforts.
This is Samantha Helge with ESO. I do have one question. Where are we on getting the ET3 custom elements for NEMSIS 3.5?
You want to take this one, Neil, or Clay? Go ahead.
Actually, I would defer to Dr. Mann first, and then I can tell you on our end, because there is some review that ET3 has to do and make sure it's finalized. But Dr. Mann, if you could comment on it first, please. Yeah,
sure. Yeah, so we're so great question, Samantha. We're well down the road in kind of describing for version 3.5 of NEMSIS how that will interact with the ET3 and the requirements to ensure that the two variations in the care of patients is properly qualified. We've also built schematron rules associated with those additional paths. I think that's what Neil was just commenting on. We've held several meetings kind of discussing those revisions. The IT team on the ET3 side is preparing to kind of understand and make the changes. So I think we're well down the road. Neil, in regards to review on your side, do you have any kind of an update as to kind of where we are with getting the team together, just to make sure that all those changes are properly communicated?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can provide, what we're still waiting a little bit on is on the IT development team, just to make sure. I think what we've left it at with them is they have the material to test with. So that part might take a little bit more time, but in terms of at least saying, hey, for 3.5, these are the elements ET3 will be collecting, that we can provide in June. And as well in June, what we're trying to do is provide, it's looking like a whole new document with some carryover material from 3.4, but a completely different or a separate data submission guide for 3.5. But I think, Dr. Mann, I don't know if it's worth noting that what we have decided, I don't foresee any changes from the leadership end with the elements. So if you already have some of those available and published, we can kind of treat them as near final, but I don't foresee any changes if vendors want to look at what is already in the works for 3.5 and ET3.
Okay, that sounds good, Neil. Yeah, we can prepare, as you mentioned, to make that available in June so people can review.
It would be fantastic.
This is Josh Legler. I can just give you a heads up on what the custom elements will look like. The custom dispositions for eDisposition.12 are going to show up as custom values in eDisposition.29 crew disposition. And it'll have two custom values. And then the only other difference is that the custom values for type of destination, mental health facility and drug or alcohol rehabilitation facility are standard values in 3.5. So those will be removed from the custom element definition. The other three values will stay. And then the third standalone custom element, the ET3 alternative disposition offer and result, will be exactly the same. That's at least what's drafted up right now.
That sounds excellent. Thank you.
And correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it as well too that the actual codes we've used for some of the custom destination elements, we actually kind of try to plan ahead and make sure that those codes match what would be the standard codes in 3.5. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Well, that'll help my dev team sigh relief there. I've been worried about that, so thank you.
Any other questions for John and Neil?
This is Mark Roberts. I just had a question. I still am not able to verify that I see that you're getting data from California agencies, but I'm still not able to verify that any of the data contains ET fields. It would be helpful to know if that's actually getting that, or they're just sending you the current calls that they're running. Those calls don't have any ET3. Also, I had sent you an email with the list of agencies that had been approved don't match anything that we have in our state list. So I really need to know who those agencies are so I can do the crosswalk back to the states and then start looking at, or excuse me, the crosswalk back to those agencies and start doing some looking to see if, are we just not getting the data? Are they not collecting it yet? There seems to be some type of a disconnect there. I'm thinking from California, all you're getting right now is just their regular day-to-day PCRs that they're collecting.
Hey, Mark, this is Kelly with ImageTrend. I sent you an email yesterday where we were able to look and see if that data was being collected. So if you have any questions about that email, please feel free to reach out to me. But I did include all that information. So if you want more details on which agencies are actually collecting or not collecting, I can talk to you about that in more detail.
Yeah, I haven't seen that email yet, so I'll take a look.
Yeah, it was late yesterday afternoon, so I can forward it to you too here again in just a second.
Great. Yeah, the names that are on the list from ET3, like AMR of Southern California, there is no such thing as AMR of Southern California.
Yeah. So Mark, I too received your email and got your follow-up email as well. We're researching a little bit of what the response should be back to you. The list is an easy one. The other part of it, in terms of looking at the data and seeing what ET3 data we've received, is just a little more of a process that we have to take in again, opening up the payload. So we'll have an answer back to you by probably by close of business today, just to give you some perspective from our side, what we're seeing in the data, as well as that list that we can provide you a little more detail so you understand who those agencies are. So just look for something from us later today.
All right, great. Thank you so much. And Kelly, I just saw your email, so it doesn't look like at this point we're actually reporting ET. We can take this offline, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, I agree with that, Mark. It looks like at this point they're not actually collecting it, but still submitting data.
Right.
If you do want to chat about it, though, we can schedule something and actually look at some stuff together if that would work better for you.
Yeah, well, I just want to make sure that I'm not missing it in my reports. I think the real key comes down to the agencies, really where the conversation needs to take place to find out why they're not submitting it. Either they're not collecting it, they're not set up for it, or they haven't had any encounters. And you don't know which one it is. But it is kind of strange to see that none of them in California are submitting.
Right, sir. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that there are a handful of agencies that are specific fields. So their legacy data is being pushed, and there's a few other things that are actually being submitted to ET3. It just looks like they're not specifically collecting those ET3 fields just yet, Mark.
No. Well,
and I know that
I understand they're submitting data to ET3, but they're not submitting any calls that qualify as ET3. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Correct. Yeah, you're.
I think we lost you, Kelly.
Oh, shoot.
Oh, you're back. You're back. We just lost your audio.
Okay. I was just agreeing with you, Mark, that your report is spot on, and I think your findings are accurate. So it does look like they are submitting data, but they're not specifically collecting the fields that you would be expecting.
And sir, this is Lieutenant Milan. I would add to that, I will look at, because there's another piece that I didn't think about when we first got your email. What I can do is connect with the project officers who are actually assigned kind of to liaise with these agencies in California and see what we know about their actual ET3 implementation date, which is the date they would have started even offering the ET3 intervention. So it could be that we're not seeing any of those elements because they haven't actually started offering those interventions. So that might be a big part of it. And I can take that as my action item to work with and get some information from those project officers, because it could well be that none of them are implementing. I know there's definitely a group, and I think a lot of the AMR group specifically wasn't planning to implement until June 1st, as far as I am last aware of. So that might be part of it, but I can take that as an action item and find out from the project officers before even reaching out to these agencies, just to see what we're tracking as far as when they're even offering ET3 interventions.
Great, thank you. Look, again, I'm just making sure that we at the state aren't missing something. And it sounds like at this point we're not, but you just never know if you don't ask. But thank you. I'm sorry to take up so much time.
Good conversation. Thank you. Any other questions for John and Neil while we have them? All right. Next on the agenda, we're going to talk for just a few minutes about the defined list process. Josh, do you want to take that?
Yes, I'm going to go
Thanks.
ahead and switch the screen sharing over here. Okay, that should do it. Yeah, we have just a bit of an update for you on where things are with the defined lists transition. Of course, this has been talked about back at the end of last year, and then some work has been done since then. A little bit of work left to do before you'll see these out in the wild. So the work that's been done so far, based on the feedback that we got from all of you late last year, we have finalized an XSD for the structure of these defined list files. We've also created a JSON schema to define the JSON format for them. And so when these files are available, they'll be available in several formats. So the current suggested list Excel spreadsheets will go away, and these new defined list files will be available in several formats that should be more easily computer processable. So you can go more towards automating the processing of the updates of these lists. So I just pulled up an example here. This is the list for cause of injury. And you can see it here in XML format. And then let's see, JSON format, it's going to look like that. Then there's a text format that'll look like that. All of those will be available through the NEMSIS public repository and via the website. In addition to that, there will be like a web view of each of these defined lists. So let me bring that one up. So this is what the web view would look like for the cause of injury list. That, people could browse the list that way. That's what's in the work in terms of the structural underpinnings of these lists and their formats. The work that's left to be done is kind of the content review and getting the process in place, kind of the business process in place for how these lists will be maintained and updated in terms of their clinical content. So Clay, I'll turn it over to you to discuss that part of it.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate all the work that you've done here. We're excited about these this kind of movement from the suggested list to the more defined lists and kind of ensuring some continuity across the country. I think this work that Josh is doing will make it really much easier for the states and for the vendors to be able to kind of standardize the approach. That is what's presented to the EMS professional, what is the underlying code. And of course, this will all, this remains just like any other part of the NEMSIS standard, where we want to provide this standard. We hope that 95 to 99% of the codes across the country will be based on this list, but clearly there can be modifications at the state and the local level. From the business side that Josh was talking about, once we have this in place, the other piece of this, of course, is a regular review of these defined lists for what additions need to be made. Are there codes that are not efficient, right? Or there's replacement codes that we should consider that may be more specific. I mean, a good example of that is the current work that's going on right now across the country in identifying potential opioid overdoses, right? There's real variability across the country in what codes are used to describe a potential opioid overdose, and continuing to kind of circle those wagons and see how we can become more focused is a good example of maybe a modification of a set of codes that currently exist. A good example of adding another code, right, might be the fact that there's this real interest in micromobility right now as it's defined by CDC, right? So that's where they're placing the idea of electric scooters that we're seeing in lots of the large cities. And then how do we ensure, at least for NEMSIS, that there's a standard code for that type of a cause of injury, for example? So from the business side, as Josh was describing, we're putting together some kind of a platform for how we would review new codes that are released by ICD-10 or SNOMED, or how do we entertain requests from agencies or states that, hey, we need to add this code or we need to modify this code. This isn't working well in our state. Our current idea is to, on a quarterly basis, update the lists, and that we would have a standard section of this meeting to be able to discuss any revisions to the code sets that are associated with these defined lists. So this stakeholder group will have complete transparency into what we're thinking of adding or what we would be added, and then there would be a scheduling whereby the vendors and the states would know that a new update has been released, kind of associated with each of these lists. So that's the idea as it exists now, and I think it will all be kind of finalized by summer. So I just want to entertain any comments in regards to the structural modifications that Josh is making, or to the kind of the business use case for how we will update these lists. Yeah, so Amber asked a great question from Colorado. Is there an expectation that vendors will continually update these lists? And I think that would be true. Yeah, Josh, I know we've talked a little bit about this. Conversations are ongoing, but I think there would be a standard approach whereby vendors could know that a list has been updated. It could certainly be announced on the implementation calls that the list will be updated on by this date, that type of thing. I think there'll be a business schedule. Anything from the technical side, Josh?
Yeah, if anyone has cloned the NEMSIS public repository and has watches on that, then those changes are going to show up there. The weekly email that the NEMSIS TAC sends out about state and national updates, you get used to seeing the state updates every week, but every once in a while you see national updates on that list alongside the state ones, and these would be a part of those updates as well.
Yeah, thank you, Amber. Let's see, Amber, let me see. You got a longer comment here. I likely missed this in the NEMSIS envision that this as a front end list available for pick list to providers or a back end reporting organization categories. Yeah, so I think we're hoping that this would represent both and that these lists, as Josh is showing here, have a suggested label. You can see there in that column. So that would be the front end. That would be the pick list that the providers would see. And then the back end is the actual code value. I think that source label is probably the ICD-10 description. Is that right, Josh?
That's right.
Yeah, so, and I think it would be both a front end pick list and the back end reporting.
Okay.
And I would say the priority is the front end. So, the priority here is giving providers a reasonable list to look at that's not too long, but not too short.
And I know we all love that idea. I mean, from a provider use standpoint, I think back when we first had 3, Clay, do you remember you invited Chris from having to come talk about his frustration with all the multiple choices? So this will be really welcome, I think. My question is just technical, safer asphyxiation. I can't even say that word. If someone picked that on the front end, there's 3 kind of source codes it comes from. And we definitely categorize when we do reporting too. So I kind of get the concept. But if it were going to actually be in reporting in a code, which one would, since they're not really picking one on the front end, if it's a category, which one would it go back to if we had to run a matrix with using the actual ICD-10 codes or something?
Oh, yes.
The software will store the code. So, the user on the front end might see asphyxiation as a category, and then within that category, they see hanging. So that's the one they choose. But what gets recorded is the code. That goes into your analysis data. From there, on the analysis side, it depends on what your vendor and you decide to do in terms of whether, what shows up is that ICD-10 label, that's certainly a possibility. Or if what shows up is some customization of that label that has been applied to the front end, that you can apply that same customization on the analysis end.
Okay, I think I understand. I think I was misunderstanding that the category itself was going to be the most detailed level that they would be picking from, not the suggested label. So that helps me. Thank you.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, so you'll see a bunch of values that all share the same category, and then they have different, they're different specific values within that category.
Yeah, and this is Clay. It's a little bit ancillary to your question, but I think it's related is the idea of a roll-up, right? A standardized roll-up, and we're also working on that for the back end, right? So if you at the state want, some standardized way to roll these codes up into categories, we're working on that as well. So.
Yeah, we would love that. I'm sure I think our epidemiologist uses, it was a Burrell matrix, ICD-9 codes put up at the CDC. And I think there's one that they just put out for ICD-10, but we'd love to see what you guys put together for that too.
Yeah, thank you, man. Good questions.
Was there any reconciliation work with the existing defined state lists?
Yes, David, actually, the work that Julianne did, I guess it's been about 2 years ago now, Julianne, where she went back and looked at all the codes that had been reported to us and then requested codes from vendors that had been added. As we built the lists, we ensured, I think Julianne was at 95% of codes were represented by the defined lists on average. Was that kind of where we were at, between 92 and 95%? So
yep.
Yeah, so David, those were included.
And these are all national elements, right?
Yes, it's for national elements, right?
That's a good question. I haven't paid attention. Let's see. Cause of injury, yes. Environmental food allergies, that is, right? Impressions and symptoms are, location type is, medical surgical history, can't remember on that one. And patient activity, I can't remember on that one. Procedures are, medications are.
Right, so David, you're right. There are some that are not national. Just any that required a list that we thought could be managed, we've tried to provide some guidance.
Okay, so then back to the first question, states like California that do have published lists for those, it sounded like there was not any reconciliation work on those.
And any list that we've provided, there has been reconciliation, right? So that work that was done 2 years ago, all the suggested lists were based on the same review process, whether we had data or not at the national level, right? So either we just use the data that the vendors provided, or we just we use the data that the vendors provided plus what we were able to pull from, I think it was 2017 and 18 data sets, I think, or something like that, Julianne, that we actually combined and aggregated all that data.
Well, so I'm asking about, so some of the data points you're not getting, correct? And so what was the reconciliation work from?
Right, David, for those, and I'd have to review it, I apologize, I may be speaking a little out of turn here, but we asked vendors, for all the lists that we wanted to review, we asked vendors to send us a list of all custom values that they've provided for those elements. Does that answer your question directly?
Sure, so we provided the ones that we have, but we kind of thought that you would have included California's. Yeah. Automatically. Were those included? There are a few states that have published lists.
Right. I can't speak directly to California, but if their lists were recognized by vendors and they provided them to us, we added them. We did not. I see your question now. I apologize. I don't remember, Julianne. I don't think we asked states to give us their lists.
No, we didn't.
Yeah. And I knew there was a handful of states that actually had lists, and so that was probably an oversight. But perhaps that's a really good reason why we'll be reviewing these on a quarterly basis if there are things we need to add. And there may be much work to do, initially out of the gate, as we try to standardize these lists, but that's why we'll have that quarterly review.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When is the first quarterly review? Is that, I didn't catch if there was a date mentioned.
Yeah, there wasn't one mentioned. That's a great question, David. I think, and I'm kind of speaking to Josh as well. I think we could plan for a fall review. Do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I think Julianne is going to give these a review right now because we're in this process of, we copied everything from the Excel spreadsheets into this new format. Julianne will go through that and do some cleanup. That'll probably be the initial cut. That's probably going to happen over the next month or two, I would guess, Julianne.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we want to make sure that the process works how we intend it to, and then we'll be able to do our first quarterly review. And we are open to people who would like to be on that, because we'll do a specific committee that will look through those and make recommendations, and then we'll put those out to the general stakeholders. But David, if you have specific interest in being on that review board, we'd love to have you.
Sure. Yeah. So would you consider doing that of the state lists that are published, just kind of cross-referencing those to see if they're covered? So it didn't occur to us to resubmit the state lists. We submitted, client-specific ones, but we kind of thought that the states would be, part of the initial work.
Yeah, David, that's a good idea. Yeah, we're happy to look at those lists. I think we could make some time and some NEMSIS team members to kind of take a look and make sure that those are represented. Will you make sure we record that, Julianne? Yeah, thank you very much. And then to Amber's comment that she provided in the chat. Yeah, this there of course will still be those specific codes that we'll need for states, right? So Amber mentions from Colorado that they need to break out ski-related falls, and then they'll have that collapse back down to some of their fall group, right? If it's not fully described in the defined list as they'd like for ski injuries. And so, yeah, that process will remain in place, Amber.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, David. Really good comments. I appreciate that. You made us aware of something that we probably need to make sure we review. So thank you. Yeah, and thanks, Amber. Let's see. Any other questions regarding the defined list process as we've kind of outlaid, and we hope to kind of have fully in place by fall? Okay. All right, Julianne, is it okay if I just take the next item?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Let me just quickly, I'll share my screen just real quickly here that we made the announcement last meeting of this group that there was a final document out that described in detail the use of the NEMSIS UUID to provide a deterministic link between state and national EMS registries and trauma registries. We were asked to, and we made this list available on the website. It was under NEMSIS, let's see if it'll respond here. Yeah, and then under NEMSIS 101, and was available right, let's see here. We were asked to pull that off the website for 1 week to give both NASEMSO and ACS time to distribute it to their professional organizations before we posted it. That was just a courtesy that they asked us to provide. So we've done that. This document is scheduled to go back up on our website as of end of business on Friday. So if any of the any of the states wanted a copy of this and tried to download it at that location, we apologize that it had to be pulled just for a couple of days. If you need it, feel free to reach out to me or Julianne. We're happy to send it to you. This was just kind of a courtesy call that we wanted to make sure that we provided both NASEMSO and ACS. Remember, this is really a high-level document that is really geared towards state representatives, where you may want to try to socialize the idea of how the UUID and NEMSIS could help with linkage at the state level and the national level for trauma registry records and for codes records or for FARS records, any other record system you have within your state that wants to access NEMSIS records. If there's a person that would be sitting in a chair that's actually trying to aggregate the data from different sources, then there's a way for the UUID to pass between those sources of data. So we're happy to talk more about how this may apply to different registries or to trauma registries within your state. Feel free to distribute this to state audiences. As I mentioned, it'll be back up on the website as of end of business Friday. And would love to have any personal invitations to speak to representatives within your state about how it might be used. So any questions related to this document and its availability? Okay. Right, Julianne, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, next on the agenda, let's see. Case definition project with Josh again.
Okay, back to me. Let me
Yep,
get my screen on again. All right, just want to give you all a heads up about a project that's been in the works for a little while and is going to get published, I guess you could say, in the next, probably the next few weeks. It's a case definitions project. The idea behind this project is to provide really to researchers and analysts, and probably also for performance management or performance measurement purposes, to say here's a standard way to get calls of type XYZ from NEMSIS data. And you can see the list here. For example, if we want to get all the cardiac arrest calls or all the STEMI calls or all the motor vehicle crashes that involved a motorcycle. Here's a standard case definition, a standard set of code that would select those records from among a bunch of EMS records in the NEMSIS format. And so I'll show you, for example, for the cardiac arrest case definition. It'll have a definition like this is what we're trying to capture. It'll have a general description of how we're going to make that selection. Then we've got kind of English pseudocode here saying this is what we're looking for in the NEMSIS elements. And following that, there's an XPath statement here. This is if you were to run this XPath code against a chunk of NEMSIS XML data, it would select the records that we're intending to select here for a cardiac arrest case. And then it's followed by some discussion, considerations, sources that we referenced as we were developing the case definition and so on. There's the references. In addition to a case definition for each of those different cases, we're also going to have some general filters that we will provide. So for example, what if you want all of the calls that were a 911 response to scene? So you could combine these with the case definitions. So you might say, I want all the cardiac arrest calls that were a 911 call. And then you could combine those two together to get your selection of records. And so it goes through several here, based on primary role of the unit, or in version 3.5, it's the unit transporting equipment capability, the level of care of the unit, et cetera, on down to the incident and patient disposition. So if you want all of the calls where there was a patient on the call, or all the calls where there was a patient who was treated, These would be the case definitions for those calls that would select those calls appropriately. We've provided these both in the 340 format and the 350 format, and then also an XPath expression that would work regardless of which version of files you were selecting data from. If it was 3.5 or 3.4, wouldn't matter. This particular XPath expression would select records from either of those two versions of data and give you that set of calls that you're looking for. In addition to what you see here, we're also going to provide SAS code. So anyone using the research data set that NEMSIS puts out will have some reference SAS code that they can apply to get their selection of records based on these case definitions. I think we've decided that the format for publishing all of this is going to be in a wiki format through the NEMSIS website. So each of the case definitions will kind of be on its own wiki page with the XPath and SAS code attached to it. And I anticipate that what we would see is over time, these case definitions may be refined a little bit. And then also over time, additional case definitions can be created as those needs are identified. So that's just kind of an overview with this project and what to expect coming here in the next month or so. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, Cassie in the chat from Georgia, she just asked if this would be made available to state managers for reference, and that will in fact be the case. Yes, thank you, Cassie.
Yeah, it'll be public.
Yep.
This is Anne in Arizona. I have a question. First of all, I was just thinking like the other week that this is something we needed, so I'm so excited to see it. And I think this is a really big ask, and I don't even know how possible it is. But the other thing that I was kind of debating the other day that I feel like there should be something more out there, and I was looking at the definitions that you all use, for example, on your, I don't remember if it's a public dashboard or a state dashboard for cardiac arrest, and for looking, or no, it was the data quality dashboard for states. So like the white paper or the guideline looking at how you define if something is complete or not. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
So I was looking at that because I was really looking for guidance for when certain things should be filled out. It was going back to a question I got from an agency. I get it over and over. For the current dispositions of someone's DOA, what cardiac arrest variables would need to be filled in, of course, from the ones we require in our state. And I looked at what our share registry wants, you know, kind of what's being used, what kind of makes sense when you read through the other questions. And I just thought, why isn't there something out there, at least like a basic kind of like, in these cases, it would make sense to have this filled in as a guideline, not as something that states have to follow or vendors have to follow necessarily, because every state has their own rules and what's required. But when I'm trying to look at data completeness, when we get into the more complicated time-sensitive illnesses, you know, I start looking like endocardiac arrest event, and the only thing close enough to someone's DOA is in the field, but they weren't really worked in the field. So that one didn't see, you know, things like that. And I'm just wondering, is that something you guys would consider doing for some of the major time-sensitive illnesses, kind of like a completeness expectation that's a little more in depth than the one that we have?
Yeah, and this is that's a great question. And we've actually been thinking about the same question a lot as I've been working with the state and territorial epidemiologists, a professional group who's trying to standardize approach to identifying opioid overdose across states. And yeah, that's such a great question, because when they built their algorithm, it includes just a barrage of ICD-10 codes and searching the narrative and, you know, these different approaches to try to maximize sensitivity, that is their ability to identify an opioid overdose. And our response back to them is, oh my gosh, can you help us maybe try to develop a more standardized approach as to how the EMS provider should characterize an opioid overdose? So I think that's kind of what you're asking, Ann, right? Is if you've got a DOA, what's the expected elements that should be completed if you have a DUA? or a DOA. Great idea. I think this document is a little bit different, but I truly see the need for what you're talking about. Maybe we need to put that on our short list of things we should maybe try to modify, and something like this geared towards more towards how providers are to document certain types of calls. That's kind of what you're talking about, right, Ann?
Yeah, I mean, whether it's from the perspective of the, I know disposition splitting, so that's, it's a whole different thing. But either from the perspective of a disposition would be great, for the general ones. I mean, if you guys just wanted to stick to national variables, I get it, that makes sense. But also, like I said, for the time-sensitive illnesses, more as a guide. I mean, I think about, we get new data managers, or we get, new administrators at agency levels, large agencies, and they're kind of, I think, looking for what our expectations are. And a lot of times I'm thinking through things and trying to figure out, asking a lot of sources, but I'd love to start with some kind of guidance document that I could kind of go, okay, this is what NEMSIS is kind of saying would be expected. How does our state fall into this? Is there anything that we collect in addition to this? It's maybe a custom variable that we would add in. And I agree, like the narrative is very, very helpful for individual cases, or if you have the time for people to read narratives like they do in certain studies. But for us, we've tried scanning the narrative and sometimes it works out. But a perfect example, when we try to look at falls, the word fall goes into the narrative and has nothing to do with falling down. It's like chest fall, all kinds of things. So, narratives are great for their purpose, but they're not great for mass data analysis, in my opinion, unless you have a lot of people. And so, I know it's a big ask, and I can see how this becomes messy and makes someone have a headache, but I do think it's potentially valuable, maybe just looking at 3.5 forward, not necessarily older, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's a great idea. And Amber echoes, from Colorado, echoes the importance of this. And we're planning to do something just like what you're describing for e-disposition, which you mentioned. We'll be talking about that just later in this call. But yeah, we'll take this under consideration and see if there's a way for us to develop a document that kind of helps with those kind of important issues, like you're saying, time-sensitive issues or other types of calls that may benefit from just some guidance about how to document the call. A great idea, Ann. Thank you.
You could see if the DMC wants to, help or start with outline, or a couple states that want to get together kind of how they've been looking at it. Because like Amber said too, I partially been thinking about it more too, because we're looking at more clearly defining rule maybe.
Yeah.
And I just realized, our rules our validation rules are pretty fair, but they could be tightened up, but I would want to do it extremely, extremely fairly and carefully. And that's where I struggle to see kind of what the overall clinical picture should bring me to as far as what we could expect. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. That's a great idea. Thank you.
I was going to ask, so it looks like this is meant to work on XML files. Is that right, Josh?
The XPath code would work on XML. The pseudocode, of course, you could adapt to whatever programming environment you're in. And then there will be the SAS code that'll work on the public release data set.
Okay, you showed me the SAS code. I don't think I'm too familiar with that.
Yeah, we don't have the SAS code yet, so I don't have anything I can demonstrate. And then Felicia mentioned that the Council for State and Territorial Epidemiologists has case definitions for lots of things. And we worked with them specifically on the opioid overdose case definition because they were working on theirs at the same time. So yeah, that's a great resource.
Any other questions for Josh on this topic?
Is this draft available?
I think we're going to have it on the website in the next few weeks. So I don't know, Clay, if you wanted to send anything out in Word, like this Word draft or anything, either way.
Yeah, sure, David. Anybody else who just like kind of a pre-publication copy, happy to do that. We're just kind of waiting for the SAS code. I think, Josh, we've reviewed everything else pretty carefully.
Yeah, and then just creating the spot where it's going to live in the wiki.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
All
a few
right.
people noted they'd like a
Cassie,
copy.
okay.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Frank and Cassie.
Frank and Cassie. Okay.
Yeah, and
I'm
David. Well, yeah.
Making a list. I put my pen down and then somebody else. All right, I'm going to put my pen down anyway, and then I'm coming back to this chat and I'll capture all of these. The next on our agenda is Monet. So Monet is going to talk, and I'm going to capture all of these out of chat that want a copy of the draft.
Greetings, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, sounds great.
Okay, fantastic. So a couple of weeks ago, we had a discussion related to the process for updating the state resources. And I want to show you where we have provided a best practices guidance document. So it's located on the NEMSIS website. Under the tab, actually, it's using EMS data, and then it's NEMSIS 101. And if you scroll down to the section that talks about state-specific tools, it is the very first document listed here. And this document was created to clarify some questions that was raised by the state data managers and then echoed with the state vendor community as well. And one of the things I want to briefly mention about this document is in this first section, we're trying to describe the type of resources that are updated. So for instance, in the state data set, it would be your facilities, your agencies, and then in the state data set, it would be the schematron rules. If you could send that document to us as an XML, in XML format to the general NEMSIS email address, which is nemsis@hsc.utah.edu. We will be able to get those documents posted fairly soon when they arrive in this mailbox. And then I want to talk a little bit about one of the things we added is a section that talks about providing a summary of the changes. The vendor community specifically asks for this information. They want to know, can you describe, did you add facilities? Did you remove agencies that are no longer in business? Just something really general that we can provide in the change log information. The other sections here describe, so let's see here, this first document is basically, we're talking a little bit about it's the state manager's responsibility to decide when they want to also update their resources, that the TAC does not, provide a schedule for when you're going to update your resources, and then how you can actually see those resources as well. Let's see, we're talking a little bit about paying close attention to when the changes are implemented so that the changes have minimal effects at the local level. And then we have the larger documents that are provided. So these might be like the 20-page thorough documents that describe the actual schematron process. So we have the version 3.4.0 schematron guide as well as the 3.5.0 schematron guide. This first link is a a development kit that's provided to help you and assist you with making sure that the framework is correct. And then in the last page of this document, we basically have the validator, which will check for the structure and also check for duplication of the rules. And the very last section is a link that provides information if you're needing to update your state data resources, update your state data set and you're unfamiliar with that process. And then you can also contact me directly if you want a step-by-step assistance with providing updating the state data set. I'll take a pause for a second and see if there are any questions. Okay, if there are no questions about this particular document, please give it a review. If you feel like we forgot something, let us know, and we'll be happy to address those questions once we are aware of them. And then the next topic that I have, Julianne, can you remind me what the next topic is?
Yes, your next topic is the state and vendor plans to migrate to 3.5.
Okay, thank you. Let me open up that document. Okay. So you will recall, do you see my spreadsheet?
Yep, sure do.
Okay, fantastic. So you'll recall a few weeks ago, we sent out a survey and we asked state managers to help us with what do your transition plans look like, your transitions to 3.5. Now, while this information is available on each state page, we also have this sort of one-page summary document which identifies when the states plan to transition to 3.5, at least what the time frame is. Now, some states did provide 2 dates, but I went with the latter date. So that information is represented here in this spreadsheet. And then we also we asked the same question of the vendors. What are your plans to have a product available? And so we have a summary of that information as well. And then, of course, TBD is to be determined. If we don't have the information, we didn't add anything. Now, when your plans change, if you can inform us of those different timelines, then we'll update these documents and have them available. Currently, they're not available on the NEMSIS website. We will determine the most appropriate location and not the compliance page. But once we determine the location, we'll provide that information out to you all via the NEMSIS Google group. And again, as your updates change or your timelines change, just let us know about that information. And I'll just pause here for a second and see if there are any questions. Okay, thank you. And the thing I really wanted to mention, especially as it relates to the state resources, I wanted to let you know that we really appreciate the effort and the time that you dedicate to make those resources available. Just yesterday, I received a call from a fire chief in a state. He needed to know the provider number for a facility he was transporting patients to. And because the state updates those resources on a regular basis, I could direct him to the information within 5 minutes. And he just expressed such gratitude. So I wanted to share that gratitude to the appropriate group of folks who make that happen. Or, we can't provide the information if you don't provide it to us. So again, thank you so very much. Continue to send your updates. If you have any questions or need assistance, we're here to help you. And have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Julianne.
Thanks, Monet. We did have one question from Ridgely in the chat about posting that. And the state information is on each of the states already. And then we will post that spreadsheet on a location on the website as well.
Yeah, Julianne, this is Claire. Let's commit to doing that this week. I think we've pretty well determined where we're going to put it. So let us just kind of finalize some decisions, but we'll commit to having that up this week. We're okay with that, right, Julianne? I think
Yep.
We're really close to getting that.
Yep,
up. Yeah.
we sure are.
Okay. And then we'll send out that location and send out the list in the Google group.
Yep. We
And
can do that.
yeah, and Cassie, it's also the list will also include the vendors, their timelines as well.
And as those dates change, we're happy to update the list as well. So just keep in contact with us. All right, next on the agenda is just a quick discussion on 3.5 education products. We're creating additional support materials for transitioning to 3.5, specifically for states, agencies, and clinicians. And while we've developed more technical tools for data managers, these products will be more educational in nature to train on the what, the how, the why of 3.5, and also that direct impact to the field. Materials will be vendor agnostic, although we welcome suggestions and inputs from our vendor partners, and we appreciate that lots of vendors are already working on materials that help educate 3.5 changes to their users. And any of the 3.5 support products that are produced by the TAC are open to all NEMSIS stakeholders to use as they need. If you have specific examples of educational materials that you would love to see as a 3.5 tool, let us know. We're happy to have those examples or educational modules that you've used in the past for other things that just seem to work really well. We're happy to have those suggestions. And we've received some really excellent suggestions from a couple of states. And it just really helps us to dial into what's beneficial and what will be useful. Also, if you are interested in being on a review committee for educational materials, we would love your input reviewing those support tools before they go out to the public. So shoot us an email, put it in the chat, or send me an email. I'll put my address in the chat as well. But we want to make sure that as we develop tools for the field or for the agency or for states, that we're on target and that we're meeting the needs that you guys specifically have. So that we've got a couple of volunteers. Thank you so much. It is a fun project, so it'll be fun. Any questions? Any questions on that? We've developed a bunch of technical tools already, but we wanted to just dial in a little bit tighter to some of the more educational tools.
Yeah, maybe just a quick shout out to David Newton and Cassie. They were we got on a call with them for about an hour, and they talked about really the differences in education between a state, between an agency, right, where there's a person in charge of quality, data quality. How do you educate that person? Then for the clinician audiences, really, what buttons do you push to correctly classify this type of a case? Getting back to what Ann talked about, right, and having tools specific to those very different needs. And so we're going to try much harder over the summer to develop very specific tools will be helpful. Yeah, so any states with interest in participating, that would be great.
And Mark's got a question about the extended definitions that we did for 3.4 with NASEMSO. We've got that updated for 3.5. It's on the website, and I'll put the link there. But as 3.5 starts to roll out, if you see spots that need that extra clarification, that extended data dictionary is so helpful. Just taking some of those elements and describing application, or just giving it a little bit more detail that's not possible in the data dictionary. NASEMSO and the Data Managers Council was absolutely instrumental in putting together that list and some of those descriptions and recommendations. So as you think through those things, and as you look at that 3.5 extended data dictionary, if we've missed one that is a huge question that keeps coming up, let us know, and we'll work with the DMC, the Data Managers Council of NASEMSO, and update that document. But those extended data definitions have been really helpful to a lot of people as they try and understand the elements and the values. I'm glad you brought that up, Mark. Thank you. Oh, and it looks like, yes, Karin already put it in the chat. Thank you. All right, next on our list, we're going to go back to Josh. We so appreciate Josh to talk a little bit about NEMSQA Performance Measures.
Okay, get the screen back over to me here. All right. So I want to give you a heads up about some future changes to the Performance Measures project. As you recall, there's a Performance Measures web service and also a Performance Measures dashboard on the NEMSIS website. There are going to be some changes coming up to support NEMSIS 3.5. These changes are probably about 6 months away from implementation, but they'll be done as the NEMSIS TAC, starts receiving its first data in 3.5 format. The performance measures were originally created under the EMS Compass project in around 2017. And then the National EMS Quality Alliance took those and did a respecification or republication of them in 2019. And of those measures that were published, the performance measures web service and dashboard provided by the NEMSIS TAC covers the performance measures that can be measured using national data elements. So there are additional performance measures that NEMSQA has published, but they use state or local elements, so they can't be implemented out of the national database. But for those that use the national elements, these have all been implemented. They're in the dashboard, they're in the web service. However, these performance measure definitions were created for NEMSIS 3.4. And as we move to NEMSIS 3.5, we need to make sure that the definitions of some of these measures are updated a little bit to reflect, to work for NEMSIS 3.5. For example, hypoglycemia 01, treatment administered for hypoglycemia. The denominator pseudocode includes this piece here that looks for calls where the blood glucose level is less than 60. So it's looking for a number less than 60. But in NEMSIS 3.5, in addition to the number range, it also allows the string low and the string high. Well, certainly low would be the same as less than 60 from a business perspective. So this particular performance measure needs to be updated to look for blood glucose less than 60 or where the string low was reported. Also, I'll look, for example, at trauma-01, pain assessment of injured patients. The denominator pseudocode includes some criteria on edisposition.12, which we all know is going away in NEMSIS 3.5. So it needs to be updated also to reflect NEMSIS 3.5. So those updates have been prepared. For example, here's the one for blood glucose level being low, and in trauma-01, here's the equivalent NEMSIS 3.5 elements and values that would be in the criteria. These measures, these definitions will be updated in such a way that they will still work on NEMSIS 3.4 data and also work on NEMSIS 3.5 data. So the same query can be used regardless of the version of data that was reported. So those, like I say, it's probably about 6 months away. Those changes will be implemented in the performance measure web service and dashboard, the underlying calculations that give you the numbers that come out. From the front end, you're really not going to see any difference other than just the fact that they'll still work with NEMSIS 3.5 data coming in. However, we do have to make a change to one of the parameters. And with that, we're changing a couple other parameters in small ways. Remember, these parameters are ways to slice and dice the data. And the parameter that we have to change is the one called level of care, because it's based on eResponse.15 in NEMSIS 3.4, which is an element that's being retired. So we're going to replace it instead with the NEMSIS 3.5 version of eResponse.07, unit and transport capability. So instead of having, slicing it by BLS, ALS, you're going to have a more detailed selection to slice things by. So you could look not only at level of care, but also the type of transport or care, whether it was air or ground or non-transport. So I think that's going to be helpful. If you want to compare air agencies to each other, you'll finally be able to do that when this change goes into place. Older data, 334, 340, it'll be translated up using the 3.4 to 3.5 translation guide so that older data will also be broken down by these categories here. So you don't have to worry about what version the data was in when it came in. You'll just be able to use this parameter and slice and dice by these different values. So that's a heads up of what's on the way. And as those updates get scheduled, we will notify you and notify you of the dates for those changes. If you have implemented anything that uses the web service and automatically, is pulling data and bringing it into your own analysis and reporting platform, then of course you'll want to be aware, especially of this parameter change, because you'll probably need to make some programming changes on your end to accommodate that change. So we'll keep you apprised of expected dates for this change. All right, any questions on the performance measures?
Hey, Josh, there's a question from Chris in the chat. I think, Chris, when you say unit, are you referring to the EMS unit or to the units of glucose given? I'm not sure what you mean by unit.
Yeah, blood glucose, what's the data dictionary say?
Yeah, what's the measurement?
I should probably go to 3.5.
Yeah, I think you're right, Chris. Let's check.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't say, just the patient's blood glucose level. And it goes, what, 0 to 100 to 200, I think, something like that. I'd have to parse out this regular expression.
Yeah, thank you. If that doesn't get to your question, Chris, feel free to reach out. I'd love to talk to you more. Okay, that's helpful.
Hey, Josh, this is Cassie from Georgia. I have a quick question for you.
Mm-hmm.
As terms of performance measures, do you plan on adding any additional performance measures in the near future, such as like medication administration in relationship to adverse events or the opposite effect of what was intended to help improve the way medication is administered in the monitoring of the patient?
Yeah, great question. So all of these performance measures are ones that have been published by NEMSQA. And so we will follow NEMSQA as they put out new performance measures, as they publish new performance measures. If those measures can be calculated on national elements only, then we'll go ahead and implement them in this performance measure service from the NEMSIS TAC.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, Cassie, and it's a good question. I think if like the DMC were to come to us and say, hey, NEMSQA hasn't worked on this type of a measure, but many states utilize this to look at performance. Clearly, that would be something I think we'd be willing to consider and bring to NEMSQA. I think when a NEMSQA has some new life that's kind of been kind of reinstated in that group, and I think they plan to be very active. Actually, they're going to be on the next call, the first NEMSIS implementation call in June. They want to get on the call and talk to us about a couple of issues. So I think there might be some more work here that will come down the pike.
Awesome, thanks.
All right, fantastic. Then, Josh, is it okay if I share my screen for just a moment? I wanted to just give folks just a quick refresher and let them know what we're the states to know how we're helping to make these performance measures be more available to you. I know that there's greater and greater interest in at the state level being able to provide performance measures. So first, I wanted to show the public dashboard that's available just through the NHTSA website. View reports, public reports is just found under V3. And here's the very the document that Josh was talking about that we keep up to date with all of the measures that he showed. And this is available so individual agencies can go in and say, okay, well, I'd like to know what like agencies like mine are doing in regards to providing a pain assessment for injured patients. And so e-trauma 01. And they, of course, come in and say, well, I'm in the South. I'm an urban agency. We're mixed. We have volunteer and non-volunteer. We're fire-based. We have 3,000 calls per year, and we're ALS. And then they're able to see, well, across the country for agencies like you, their performance is about 67% of trauma patients receive a pain assessment. And so it allows them to kind of drill in and be able to see how they're doing in regards to like agencies, right? And then we hope the vendors are using the web services, and so these numbers can be made available to them in their interfaces. What we're trying to develop, and we're really close to releasing this, so this is a state dashboard that will be made available. It's still not quite ready, but what we plan to do here is to make some modifications for you as a data manager, where, for example, if I use that same Trauma 1 pain assessment, you can now choose individual agencies within your state to actually provide a more detailed report that you can download into a PDF and just provide to agencies that are interested in knowing what their performance is, right? In relationship to the state and to the national, which was present before. This is a national trend line. Now they'll have a national trend line, a state trend line, and then their agency, right? So let's just choose one. If I was, and I've gone in as all states, and so the list here of agencies is just giant, but I'll choose number 1 here. Someone has an agency with the number 1 in their state. If I choose that, then you can see I've got a number for that agency for their 2020 data and their 2021 so far. Here's their state performance line. This state's doing better than the national average, right? And there's the national performance. And then it automatically knows the characteristics of that agency, right? So this is a state in the Northeast. They serve a suburban population. They're mixed. They're private, and so on, right? But this would be a way for agencies interested in tracking, or for you to advertise any agency who wants to know how they're doing compared to like agencies within their state or at the national level. This will provide you an easy way to provide a report for individual agencies. So any questions on this? On this additional dashboard? And I imagine that this dashboard, it's really close to being ready. I'd imagine in the next week or so, this will also be posted on the NEMSIS website under the state dashboards. Any questions by states? All right, thank you. I'll turn it back over to you, Julianne.
Thanks. You've got the last topic on state submission delay, but we're also down to just a few minutes. Do you want to hit that really quick, or do you want to table that for next time?
I'll be really, really quick. Thank you very much. Yeah, so we distributed this Excel spreadsheet on the DMC call that was held last week. It looks at, for each of the states, what are their, if they have legislation indicating or rules indicating how quickly a EMS PCR should be submitted after the record is or the call's completed. And then we compared that to the 2020 records. What was the median days and mean days until records were complete within those states? Jay in Wyoming pointed out that these numbers are extended by the fact that if an agency was to resubmit a record, so later on they get an insurance a name or something, they want to update a record and send it to the state, we receive an update, and then that update comes into our records and we count that as a very extended record, right? Because the call was actually completed much later than when the record was updated. So for Wyoming, Jay was saying, hey, it isn't 10 days. And actually, when we looked more closely at it, he's right. It's about 72 hours is the median time until record completion. So we're going to fix this, remove those those resubmissions with a little bit of a trick that we've kind of come up with. So data managers expect this Excel spreadsheet that you received in the DMC call to be somewhat different, and we'll try to get that data as soon as possible. And so we'll stop here, Julianne.
All right, sounds good. Just a couple more things. Eric, do you have anything from the Office of EMS you'd like to share?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. No, I have nothing specific for the group other than to be safe, take care of yourselves as we come into vacation season. You know, our trauma injury trends are still down. Let's keep them that way. The hold my beer, watch this things. We anticipate that they're going to start going back up again now that people get a little more relaxed about COVID. So please take care of yourselves over the summer, get some vacation, get some rest. And if you need anything from us, please don't hesitate to give us a call. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Couple of upcoming events. We have a public training on research tools, June 1st. And then boot camp for state data managers is July 13th. This will be specific for state and territory offices of EMS that are involved in 3.5 transition. Anybody outside of that grouping will need to have permission from their state data manager, their state office of EMS to participate in that boot camp. And then annual meeting in August. We're excited for that. The next V3 implementation call will be not May 26th, that's today. It will be June 9th. So a couple weeks away for that, same time, same place. Thank you everyone for being with us this morning. As Eric said, please feel free to reach out with any questions or concerns, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.